My former allies, the French, have just betrayed me, attacking one of my most vulnerable castles. Denmark and Sicily have joined forces against me and are pushing my armies back, and the Pope is threatening to excommunicate me for my aggression towards Spain, which will plunge my empire into disarray. To the east, the Timurids overwhelm all they touch and are sweeping towards Central Europe with their war elephants. To the west, my foothold in the New World is besieged by the Aztec horde, and at home in Britain, while I deal with malcontents and rebels, a papal inquisition is trying my generals and royals for heresy. I'm playing Medieval 2, and all the known world has plunged into war. Total war. Medieval 2 is a real-time tactics and turn-based strategy hybrid. The turn-based strategy side of the game is quite a bit like a forex, like Civilization. Here you take turns to build your forces in your cities, move your armies around, engage in diplomacy, espionage and subterfuge with your diplomats, spies and assassins, and spread your religion with your priests or imams. It's also where you initiate battles, but unlike your usual turn-based strategy games, when a fight starts in Medieval 2, the game switches to glorious 3D, and you play out the battle there and then, directing the battle on a tactical level in real time. I'm sure a lot of people groan as soon as they hear the word turn. The word brings to mind images of sitting, waiting, being quiet, having patience, and not being instantly gratified. But Medieval 2 is not that game. Not only is the RTT side of things fast and exciting, the turn-based side is too. In the first place, you only see the moves of factions within your line of sight, which isn't likely to be more than 2 or 3 factions at a time. You can set your unit movement to super fast, so that the moves fly by in a few seconds, and as dangerous as it is, you can even disable the viewing of enemy moves if you like. In other words, watching all of the enemy's turns takes either a few seconds or is instantaneous. As turn-based as this game is, it's not about sitting around and waiting. There are a number of game modes, but the centrepiece is the Grand Campaign. This game mode puts you in control of one of the many factions in the game. There are something like 17 in total, but initially only 5 are available, and tasks you with specific objectives like conquering a set number of provinces, destroying specific factions, and controlling specific cities. The campaign can be played in either a short or long variety, which each have different objectives for each faction, but as destroying France or conquering Jerusalem is a strangely arbitrary victory condition, you can keep playing once the objective has been accomplished if you think total conquest of the known world is a more fitting way to end the campaign. Unlike your usual forex, and of course reflecting the climate of the era, conquest is the only way to get anything worthwhile done in Medieval 2. All of the other facets of the game exist only to help your war effort. You'll begin the campaign with just a few provinces, and you'll be asked by your council of nobles to conquer some of the nearby rebel cities. The fact that rebels, Total War's equivalent of Civilization's barbarians, can control cities means that you can get a feel for combat and for conquering cities before you interact with other factions. Starting wars could permanently and harmfully affect how the game plays out, but everyone is permanently at war with the rebels, so this is a great way to ease you into the game. You'll receive other missions periodically, from conquering cities and initiating diplomatic relations, to blockading ports and assassinating kings. These missions lend a sense of structure to the early stages of an otherwise very open and potentially overwhelming game, and it also gives you a tangible sense of accomplishment very early on as you complete these missions and are rewarded, which is encouraging in the early stages when your empire consists of just a few provinces and you get the feeling nothing much is actually happening. Later on you'll probably find that you ignore most mission orders, and it's unfortunate that there's no way to automatically reject all missions. If you're playing as a Catholic nation, you will also receive missions from the Pope. Being beholden to the Pope can be a chore at times, but if a Catholic nation attacks a fellow Catholic, it risks excommunication, which has numerous negative effects, meaning the Catholic nations will often be able to hide behind an uneasy peace enforced by the Pope, which Orthodox Christians and the Muslim factions won't get, making the game play out differently depending on your faction's religion, which is great and gives the game a lot of replay value as there are 3 distinct religions with different playstyles. There are also papal elections whenever the existing pope dies or is helped by one of your assassins, with the cardinals that exist in the game being the candidates. If you manage to get your man in as Pope, you can act far more aggressively towards your fellow Catholics, and even call crusades on the excommunicated and non-Catholic. On the other hand, if the Pope doesn't like you, you might be fair game for every Catholic nation out there, and you may find inquisitors stalking your territory, trying your generals for heresy if they aren't pious enough, which will keep your assassins' hands full. The Pope adds a fantastic dynamic to the game, and while only Catholic nations get to experience it, it's a very double-edged sword, so the Catholics don't exactly have the advantage. The campaign map is split into a number of provinces. In each province is either a city or a castle. Cities are centres of wealth, while castles are less financially productive, but where most of your serious military forces are trained. One of the most important elements of the game is keeping your people happy. Their happiness is determined by a large number of factors. A large garrison in a city, a low level of taxation, or building a brothel will make your people happier, for example, but things like excommunication, war, and religious discord will make your people less happy. Unhappiness, represented simply by a coloured face icon, can ultimately lead to riots that cause property damage, and to rebellion that can lose you control of the city, meaning you can find yourself fighting a civil war if you neglect your people. Castles are much less prone to unhappiness than cities, but the fickle city folk are vital for your economy, forcing you to juggle the two province types and treat each differently, adding a nice layer of complexity. You'll constantly be interacting with the other factions in the game, and there are a lot of different ways of doing so. Your spies can check out cities so you can see what you're up against. Princesses can marry generals to forge blood alliances. Merchants can secure resources dotted around the map for a fixed income each turn, and attempt hostile takeovers of enemy assets. Priests and imams can push their religion and deal with witches and heretics. Diplomats can forge treaties and alliances, and assassins can take down enemy generals or agents. You can even assassinate the Pope to prompt a new papal election. All of this is done with a remarkably simple and intuitive interface. All of your units and agents are dotted around the map, looking a little like chess pieces. Moving and using them is simply a matter of point and click, with all of their abilities presented very clearly. This apparent simplicity belies an incredible depth. It's definitely not on par with the 4X, but you're juggling a huge number of units and agents. You're building a vast empire, you're dealing with army unit composition, and you're planning out your strategy for conquest. And yet it's extremely accessible and simple. And pop-up advisors talk you through every single thing in the game the first time you encounter it. It's a grand, complex game, but it's clearly been designed to be played by anyone who fancies themselves emperor of the entire planet. It's also unusually fast-paced for a turn-based game. Concise notes appear on the left side of the screen, updating you on every aspect of your empire, meaning you can be fully informed on everything from the cities needing an upgrade to a death in the royal family, which keeps the constant info dump very manageable. As I said earlier, there's very little waiting, but there's also a near constant sense of urgency as you feel obliged to expand your territory, and unlike your usual 4X, all of the provinces are fixed and you can't found new ones, meaning war is the only route to expansion. You'll always be at war with a number of factions, or be planning your next war. The turn-based map actually leads to some remarkable tension and excitement. There's nothing quite as intense as having one of your castles besieged, as you desperately scramble to build a relief force to send in and save your surrounded and besieged castle defenders, whose numbers dwindle with every turn as they starve to death. And as distressing as it is, there's nothing quite as cool as having your closest ally betray you just as you started a war with the most powerful faction, and were relying on their support for victory. And with the inclusion of crusades and jihaads, if you do too much to piss off a rival religion, you can find yourself the target of a third of the known world. That they've made a turn-based game that is intense and exciting, and has depth and accessibility, all at once, is an incredible achievement. And I actually enjoyed the turn-based aspect of the Total War series a lot more than all the other TBS games out there. It may not be quite as complex as its 4X rivals, but it's genuinely exciting and regularly gratifying. But what lets it down is the AI. It has a number of really weird quirks. First of all, diplomatically, the AI is fucking crazy. They break alliances they need, they refuse offers that greatly benefit them, and they unilaterally refuse to become vassals even when faced with destruction. Pride would make refusal to bend the knee something that does happen now and then, but I've never had a vassal and I've spent hundreds of hours playing the game. The way they choose targets to attack is kind of crazy too. Not always, but a lot of the time, it's specific cities they want, regardless of which faction owns them. This means factions will break alliances they need and start wars they can't win over some insignificant province they've randomly decided they want, and it also means they'll often ignore virtually undefended provinces on the way to their target. If you figure out which province the enemy plans to attack before he does, you can completely vacate your troops, which will cause an instant rebellion and the city will fill up with rebel troops. The AI will still attack it, only they'll waste their resources trying to kill rebels while you sit back and watch, and then just clean up whatever's left. I've comfortably survived a number of jihads and crusades, and preserved a number of important alliances by doing this.